Okay, geometry students, today we're covering the properties of quadrilaterals. We have some art here by Yadira in my geometry class, and it's on both sides, her artwork is, of your handout. So enjoy that art during the video. We're starting off here talking about special quadrilaterals, trapezoids specifically, and looking at these examples of trapezoids. What I hope you see is that in each trapezoid, there is a pair of parallel sides. In these not trapezoids, what is it that makes this one not a trapezoid? Well, I notice that there we have a pair of parallel sides there and a pair of parallel sides there. It's not a trapezoid, so it must be that trapezoids only have one pair of parallel sides, not two. This one, it's not even a quadrilateral. Five sides in that figure, so it cannot be a trapezoid, even though it has one pair of parallel sides. And this one, well, that's a mousetrap, not a trapezoid. So if we look down below here, what are the characteristics of each quadrilateral? The trapezoid has exactly one pair of parallel sides. Exactly one pair of parallel sides. And that is a trapezoid. Kites will be our next special quadrilateral that we look at. So these are all examples of kites. Be careful, these don't say that those sides are parallel, they say that they're the same length. So in each of those examples of kites, there are two pairs of congruent sides. So let's look over here at these not kites. What makes this one not a kite? Well, we have two pairs of congruent sides, but we have this fifth side, so it's not a quadrilateral. In this one, we have three sides that are congruent, but not two pairs of congruent sides. Here, we do have two pairs of parallel sides, but this is not a kite. So the problem is that we have to have two pairs of distinct consecutive congruent sides. Here, those sides are congruent, and these sides are congruent. So that's two pairs of parallel sides, but they have to be consecutive. So notice here, this side and that side, they're congruent and they share an angle. This side and that side, they're congruent and they share an angle. But the sides that are congruent over here don't share an angle. So a kite is a quadrilateral with two distinct pairs, two distinct pairs of consecutive so they're in a row, they share an angle, congruent sides. Now parallelogram. Looking at the parallelograms, you see that there's this side and that side are parallel, this side and that side are parallel, this side and that side are parallel, this side and that side are parallel. All right, so it looks like two pairs of parallel sides. Let's have a look at the not parallelograms. Well, we have two pairs of parallel sides here, but we also have two extra sides, so that is not a quadrilateral. Here, we just have one pair of parallel sides. These sides are not parallel, so it can't be a parallelogram. In this, no sides are parallel. So that cannot be a parallelogram. So when we talk about the characteristics of parallelograms, we know that it's a quadrilateral and it has to have two pairs of parallel sides. Okay? That is a parallelogram. Now we are on to, the rhombus. So when I look at these, I notice that these sides are all congruent in that one, and they're all congruent in this one. So it looks like something about all sides being congruent. And then we have a pair of parallel sides, two pairs of parallel sides. A pair of parallel sides, two pairs of parallel sides. So all sides being congruent and two pairs of parallel sides. Let's see if that makes sense over here with the not rhombuses. We have two pairs of parallel sides, but all the sides are not congruent. So those are congruent and those are congruent, but that's not congruent to that. So that's what makes that not a rhombus. Here, we have two pairs of parallel sides, but it doesn't say anything about the sides being congruent. If all the sides were congruent, like this, then it would be a rhombus. Here, all the sides are congruent, but it's not a quadrilateral. So, the characteristic of rhombuses, it's an equilateral. Remember equilateral? Equilateral means that all sides are congruent, and it's an equilateral parallelogram. So we use what we know about parallelograms to say something about the rhombuses. So if we look back at parallelograms, parallelograms have two pairs of parallel sides. So that means that a rhombus must also have two pairs of parallel sides and be equilateral. Rectangles, two pairs of parallel sides, it looks like. And this says that all the angles are congruent. And this says also that all the angles are congruent. This adds more information. It gives us the specific information that all of the angles are 90 degrees. In these not rectangles, well, this is a triangle, not a quadrilateral, so it cannot be a rectangle. This is a pair of parallel sides and another pair of parallel sides, so far so good. However, it doesn't say anything about the angles, so we don't know whether or not they're all congruent. Cannot be a rectangle. Here, all of my angles are not congruent, so it cannot be a rectangle. So for rectangles, the characteristics, it's a parallelogram, so that means that it has two pairs of parallel sides, and it has four congruent angles. So it's a parallelogram with four congruent angles. Our last special quadrilateral here is a square. What I notice about these squares is that all the angles here are right angles, but here it just says that they're all congruent. These are parallel and those are parallel, and all four sides are congruent. So parallel, parallel, and all four sides are congruent. Okay, why isn't this a square? All four sides are congruent, but it doesn't I don't know whether or not these angles are congruent, which if they were, then it would be a square. In this one, all four angles are right angles, which works, but all four sides are not marked as congruent. So it isn't necessarily a square. And this one, well, it's a triangle, not a quadrilateral. So the characteristics of a square, this one, there are a few different ways we talk about squares. So it's an equilateral rectangle. So equilateral, all sides are congruent. And if we look over at rectangle, a rectangle is a parallelogram. So that means that a square is a parallelogram. And it says, and it has four congruent angles. So a square must have four congruent angles, but it's equilateral. So that adds that. Another way that we talk about squares is we say that it's an equiangular rhombus. Equiangular rhombus. Equiangular means all the angles are congruent, and a rhombus is an equilateral parallelogram. So equiangular, equilateral parallelogram. So it comes out to be the same thing there. And the last way that we usually talk about a square is a regular quadrilateral. Regular quadrilateral. Regular means all the angles are congruent, all the sides are congruent. Quadrilateral means that it's a four-sided figure. So those are the characteristics of the special quadrilaterals. There'll be another video covering